What's up, girls? I just read The Origins and History of Consciousness by Eric Neumann. A little light reading. Eric Neumann is an analytical psychologist, student of Carl Jung's. He was a German Jew in the 1930s who fled to Tel Aviv when the Nazis came to power. He's friends with Joseph Campbell. And this book is considered very, very important in the canon of psychology. I watched Better Than Food book review on this book, who is one of my favorite YouTube book reviewer guys. Very smart, eloquent guy. I'll link his channel below if you're watching this on YouTube. But he it's not that he struggled to put this book into words. It's just that it's such a complicated book that you're not really able to put it into words. And that's what he kind of says during the review. So, if he can't do it, I probably can't either, but I'm going to give it a shot and just kind of riff on it and talk about my thoughts. First of all, I started reading this book because I've been reading a lot of Carl Jung, and I was watching some Jordan Peterson videos on Carl Jung, and he was saying that this book is a great introduction to Carl Jung, and I took that literally, and I was like, oh, perfect, I could really use an introduction to Carl Jung, and I get now that he was being kind of wry or making a joke about how complicated Carl Jung is, because this book is insanely complicated. And I guess, if you want to understand Carl Jung at his fullest, at his greatest depth, it takes a lot of work. So this book starts off with the symbol of the Ouroboros, which is the idea of the snake eating itself. It's kind of a perfect circle, and it's supposed to represent a paradox, infinity, life and death at the same time, light and dark, masculine, feminine. It is the paradox of being alive, basically. And I think it's from Egyptian myth, but Neumann takes it as the united conscious and unconscious. When you start off in the world as being completely whole. And that the reason that we kind of discern the world through a dialectic or through polarity is that we're divided by unconscious and conscious. And in the first stage of life, when you're a baby, those two things are whole. And then once your ego starts to develop as a toddler, he interprets that stage of life, or he talks about that stage of life through the archetype of the Great Mother, which the Great Mother is another book by Eric Neumann, where he spends an entire book breaking down that archetype. But the Great Mother is the idea of, and it doesn't have to literally be your mother, I don't think, but he is kind of fixated on gender in everything. And it's the idea of that which gives you life can also kind of destroy you. And, I think if you think about it practically rather than symbolically or through myth, it does make sense. I think a lot of people's problems kind of come from their parents, but you wouldn't be here without your parents who give you life. So there's kind of this paradox of the very things that give you life also have the potential to pass on chaos, and they themselves probably just inherited chaos from the world and from their parents, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that part's pretty interesting. he goes into different mythologies, the Christian religion, Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology. He spends the most time on Egyptian mythology and the myth of Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Set. Um, Osiris is, you know, supposed to represent, in Neumann's opinion, consciousness, and then Set represents complete chaos and the unruly nature of the world and like unbridled energy, basically. Um, and I believe the myth goes that Set breaks down Osiris. Isis is supposed to be symbolic of the feminine, like rebirth, and then Horus perseveres as the new, better consciousness. He's supposed to represent individuation, which is like, you know, um, the merging of your unconscious and conscious wants and desires and selves. Um, Neumann has this concept of the ego being represented by I, and then the self being the ego and the unconscious brought together into one. Um, it's like a wholeness idea, a whole idea of the self. Um, in terms of the gender stuff, I've been pretty. Something kind of clicked for me as I was reading this book, which was like, I feel like smarter conservatives or whatever, like a Jordan Peterson type or a Camille Paglia type, they're always kind of appealing to religion and ancient myth, and I think part of that is because myth is like very gendered. There are a lot of gender ideas in myth, which are supposed to be. A lot of these myths are like pre-patriarchal, so to speak. Um, so I think they kind of, at least one aspect of their like political ideologies is that like um, they like to appeal to certain gender roles that are not just derived from the power structure of the patriarchy, if that makes sense. That was kind of fascinating. This book was, I know, like very influential for both Jordan Peterson and Camille Paglia. I do kind of want to read Sexual Personae by Camille Paglia, so probably will at some point. Um, and yeah, that's The Origins and History of Consciousness by Eric Neumann. Check it out. Check out the Better Than Food book review on it. And thanks